Hello and welcome all to another episode of the Go to Market Game Plan, sponsored by Kixie. I'm your host, Chet Lovegreen, aka the Sales Doctor, and I'm really excited today. As you know, this is the show where we tackle go to market challenges that revenue professionals, go to market leaders, and individual contributors like yourself are facing in not only sales, but also marketing and customer success. We like to cover the entire revenue engine. While we're getting started, want to go ahead and we love getting some engagement. Would love for some people to type in the chat where you're listening in from, what you're working on these days. Give a shout out to your city, give a shout out to your company, but more importantly, let's give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Kixie. We want to throw as much love to our partners over at Kixie if we can. If you're not using Kixie, you should really check it out. A lot of people have been asking me lately, hey, we've heard you plug Kixie on the podcast. We've heard you talk about it on TikTok. We've heard you make some posts about it. And what does Kixie really do? And so let me kind of give you the lowdown on what Kixie really specializes in. You probably heard of tools like Orem or Monster Connect, these power dialers where you can load up a list of prospects in tandem with your sales engagement platform and dial multiple numbers at once and connect with the number that actually picks up the phone. This might sound a little crazy, but in my experience, the reason this is so valuable is because when you have high-performing outbound sales teams that are responsible for doing cold outreach or even targeting large lists of leads that attended a webinar or have maybe raised their hand to get some content that's been gated, like a white paper or a case study from you, it's really time-consuming to have your outbound team go line by line and click to dial. And it's just not very proficient. So by loading up a list of numbers and names, getting them connected automatically with those prospects, you eliminate the time that people are sitting on the phone, listening to dial tones, leaving voicemails. It has voicemail box drops. So you can detect when voicemails are picking up and will drop an automated voicemail for them that you've pre-recorded ahead of time. There's local presence features. So let's say you're calling someone in Chicago, it's going to come up with a local area code that's going to make that person more prone to pick up and make it feel like you have business being there and contacting them. So if you're looking for a parallel dialer or you're interested in how they work, Kixie's done something really awesome in partnership with a Sales Doctor, and we're giving away free, fully loaded 10-day trials of Kixie. Hours of call credits included. The onboarding is really simple. I was able to get onboarded myself. And I'm an idiot, right? I did need a little bit of help from the team when I was trying to set up some advanced features and needed some additional insight on best practices, but they were more than willing to offer that. They're really flexible. It's a great tool. Really encourage you to go check it out. We love partnering with them. They've been a big part of the success that we've had on the podcast and we've had on the content with LinkedIn. And we see a lot of engagement, with all the things that we're doing with them in our newsletter, on our podcast, on the LinkedIn Lives. And so I encourage you, if you've gotten value out of any of the content that we've done, either on the podcast with Billy or in the newsletter that we publish to the community or these LinkedIn Lives, that you go check out Kixie. Tag them in the comments here. Let's get some love going. So today, we're talking about something that I'm really passionate about. And if you've been listening to the podcast recently, you know we're in this phase where we're talking about sales enablement. We're talking about it in two different phases. We're talking about it in the first 30 days of onboarding, so crucial and so vital to a team member success. And then in our second episode, we're going to be talking about post onboarding, that continuous training and enablement that needs to happen to make sure that reps are where they need to be. And so today I wanted to accompany two very special people to talk about that first part of onboarding, enabling sellers during that onboarding. And even though we don't live in a candidate market like we once did, hiring, onboarding, training, it's all still just as important as it was when we were living in the blank check era of 2020 to 2022. The problem right now is it doesn't really feel like there's a standard benchmark for what works. A lot of people, in my experience, when I go and work with companies, are just kind of ad hoc putting together programs based on some crowdsourced insight internally and their own experience as well. But there's no science or actual tried and true proven methods that are really applied to those first 30 days of onboarding. Now, I agree there's no silver bullet. There's definitely key insights and staple business practices and motions that we should be implementing, whether you're onboarding SDRs, AEs, solutions engineers, full cycle sellers, CSMs, doesn't matter. And those are the things that we're going to talk about today. What are some of those key insights, staple practices, and motions that people who are doing this, in addition to myself, successfully day in and day out, how do they look at those practices? How do they look at those business best practices and key staples? And so as we get started, I'm going to introduce our first guest today. She is a former colleague of mine during my time at Jelly Smack, where we got to work hand in hand developing sales training and enablement programs. She was the VP of Revenue and Enablement Strategy globally for the entire company. She's also got 2 decades in the sales game as a seller, sales leader, and builder of sales enablement programs. And right now, she's actually running her own consulting practice right now. So please welcome to the show, Giorgia Ortiz. Giorgia, how you doing?
Hi, folks. Good to be here, Chet. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I think about 3 months ago, we were talking about filming some content together and putting something out to the people. And I was like, we don't get enough FaceTime about sales enablement. Everyone wants to talk about discovery and writing a cold email and perfect cold call. It's like, we know that, but like, let's talk about the things that really are important to making sellers successful. We always like to on the show, I try to give as great of an intro as I can, but we like to give the guests 30 seconds to just share a little bit of extra insight in their background that maybe I didn't cover that the audience should know about you heading into this episode. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chet. Well, thanks. It was great. We had some great times together at Jelly Smack. It was an interesting experience, definitely building out the program for them. I think for the last 10 years, really being in 10 or 12 years, being in SaaS and working in the startup world, coming from the larger companies, it's been interesting to really dig into what it takes to make a company tick. I think for those of us that have really made our careers over the last decade in the startup world, it gives us this, it's given me this great opportunity to peel that onion back and really understand the fundamentals. Because in order for us to scale, and I know we're talking about onboarding today, and that's really where it starts. I think you and I both have had experiences. We go in and we really need to kind of go back to the beginning. And sometimes a lot of the problems begin in onboarding. So I'm glad we're talking about that today. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have you. And I think speaking not only as someone that, like you, goes in and helps sales teams now, but even in the past, working as a W-2 employee, anytime I came in and I saw that the onboarding program was complete crap, I was like, wow, I'm ready to go. You know, they hired the right person. I love the onboarding and enablement side of it. Because it's also a special skill. Like there are people that can do it, but it's also about how well can you train others to do it. It's a completely different skill set, and how do you time out the trainings and all those fun things. And I know we're going to dig into it. So I'll wait for Troy to get up here in a second. Second guest today, former successful BDR and outbound seller. He's a really pivotal piece of the onboarding and development for the BDRs over at our partner Kixie. I also say that he's got the best mustache in the sales game. He definitely gives me mustache envy. But please welcome the outbound team lead and sales onboarding specialist at Kixie, Troy Ortega. Troy, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Chad, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the mustache love. Goes both ways.
Yeah, I was every day when I shave and I'm trying to keep the mustache nice and clean, I'm like, oh man, it'll never be as good as Troy's. Maybe someday, one can dream. Troy, other than being a kick-ass BDR and now a team lead and helping onboard people and having a great mustache, what else do the viewers need to know about you as we go into our conversation today? 30 seconds, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Chet. I mean, I've been at Kixie for a little over a year and a half now, and over the last 2 months, we decided that we wanted to scale this outbound team. So I have been onboarding 4 new reps in the last 2 months. So I'm excited to kind of talk about what I've done to help them become successful. And I know there's a million different ways that people have talked about how you onboard. So I'm excited to tell you guys what I've learned and how we do it here at Kixie.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. And if we're lucky, I don't know if your husky's going to make an appearance, but we definitely love to see that beautiful dog.
She probably will.
Point. Awesome. So let's dive into it again. Let's share some love. Tag Kixie in the comments. Remember that we want to give you personalized responses to the questions that you may have. So we may not get to answering Q&A in the show, but if you have questions, please put them in the comments and we'll make sure that Joe or Troy will reach out to you with a personalized response so we can make sure that we get you an answer that's tailored and bespoke to your challenges. So we love to do this fantasy football snake draft style when we go through these questions. So whoever answers first, they'll be on the second go around of the next question. But Joe, this first question I'm going to toss to you. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and I have my own thoughts on this, but I see it different from everybody. Essentially, the question is to train or not to train your SDRs and BDRs specifically on the entire product suite as well as you would an AE? How much product training goes into the onboarding side of the SDR and the BDR role as you see it, or as you would recommend to your clients?
Yeah, that is a conundrum, right? That we come across a lot. My personal opinion is that you absolutely need to give your BDRs that product knowledge. And it's a bit more nuanced than that. And this goes for the AEs as well, but specifically for the BDRs, they need to understand the problems that the product solves, because that's what they are looking for when they're calling prospects, right? What problems do they solve? How do I identify a pain? And they need to understand how the product solves that pain. So while they may not be selling the product, they absolutely really have to understand what the product does and the pain that it's solving in order to be able to have more valuable, meaningful conversations with the prospects to get them to see a demo or to get them to speak with an AE. So I'm kind of on the side of really embracing the role of a BDR and give them the training that they need to feel like they really have a say in understanding our product. And keep in mind too, you're building your AE bench. So I feel like limiting what you're going to be telling the group that is the first point of contact for your prospects. I think that's probably not the best strategy. I think you really want to empower them to feel empowered, that they know the product. I certainly wouldn't necessarily do a ton of feature training, but I do believe that they need to understand the comprehensive platform and the problems that the products solve. The great thing is then when the customer, how do you do that? That's a great question. I'd really love to get an AE scheduled to, talk about how we do it. So that's where the transition comes and why it's okay for them not to know the hows, but they need to know the what for sure.
Yeah, and I think it varies on how technical your product or service is, right? If it's a more of a point solution, there's probably a lot less product specifications that are relevant. But I love that you called that out. Well, how does that do it? Well, hey, that's a great question for me to jot down to have a conversation with my colleague. Plus, it gives them some reason to show up to the call because they want to see how it's done. So I love that. So Troy, how about you? When you're onboarding BDRs at Kixie, obviously we want them to have a look at the platform and we want them to understand the core functionality and what it does and why it's important. But how in depth does product training go for your BDRs when you're onboarding them?
Yeah, I mean, here at Kixie, we like to do a little more of a holistic understanding of the product rather than like what Giorgia said, feature training. I like to get them more understanding like the landscape of the industry, more stuff about competitors, what differentiates us, kind of identifying the ICP more than just learning everything they can about the product. Just at the end of the day, when your first 30 days, you're learning so much, you're going to forget things. So I think just getting that holistic understanding, what do we do? What do we solve? Who do we solve, this problem for? I think that's a much more effective way of getting the ball rolling for them, rather than, just diving into the product like an AE would, because an AE is going to need to get on demos in the first month, and they need to know every single answer to every single question. Like Giorgia said, I don't know that answer. I'd love to get you on a call with my AE. That's the SDR's job. Get that interest, get that demo. You're not selling the product.
Mm-hmm. It's product with context, right, Troy? It's product with context. So when you're training them on the ICP, right? What does the ICP care about? And how do you solve what that ICP cares about? What are the market dynamics? What's happening in the market? What are the market calling for? How do we solve what the market needs? And so there's this, holistic, integrated way of bringing product into what they need without leading with the features and the, the traditional way of learning product that, would always leave us asking, well, who cares? Like, I don't care, right? And that's what you want to avoid. But it sounds like you're doing it right.
I love that you do call out understanding the competitors, Troy. Obviously, we don't want to get into a feature dump, but I do think like if you're talking to someone and they go, oh, well, Troy, no, we're good. We already use Orem. That's going to help you better understand when you say, oh, that's fantastic. We know a lot of people that love Orem. What do you love most about it? Right? Gives you an opportunity to understand what feature set they specifically like out of Orem. And if it is something that might be a gap in your product, there's a different way your BDR is going to take that conversation to book that discovery. But if there's something where you know your product is a differentiator, that's, hey, great. I love that you love XYZ feature. A lot of people that use Kixi are very, love that feature as well. Can I show you why people have moved over from Orem to Kixi specifically for that feature? That's a great segue into that. So I do like that you also hit on that competitor side of it. That's both great stuff. I love it because, with a lot of experience in SDR leadership, I always hated when people are like, oh, we got to get them all trained up on the product. And it's like, no, you're going to drown them in product training. You're going to, like you said, Troy, too, like you're going to, you learn a lot in 30 days. Let's focus on the sales stuff more than the product stuff, because we want to pick and choose what we retain. All right. So Troy, you're going to be the first one to go on this question here. So this is another one that I think is, there's no real good benchmark. And I think it does kind of pertain to how technical or maybe how in-depth your outbound motion is. But how soon should you get sellers practicing the tactical side of their job, their duties, without sacrificing quality of execution and potential loss of opportunity? So getting people on the phones, for instance. And how do you do that, right? Are you actually giving them prospects to call actively, or are you doing a Sam Nelson, Agoji, sell people a pizza in their third week on the phones kind of tactical practice that he teaches when he was leading SDRs at Outreach? What do you do?
I personally like to get people going as soon as possible. With BDR work, they can even start on LinkedIn, email, stuff like that, where I can actually guide them behind the scenes rather than them being, face to face with a customer, where some opportunity can be lost there if they, don't know what they're doing. But even on the phones, I like to get them on right after we do some mock calls while it's fresh in their first week. And I think it helps the nerves, because if they do mess up, they're brand new, they don't know everything. It's also a good way to talk to a prospect. Like, I really don't know the answer to that. I'm brand new. I'm 1 week in. But it's also situational, because I think in a lot of industries, the opportunity could be smaller. There could be a smaller market. Whereas here at Kixi, we are extremely versatile dialing system. We work with mortgage all the way to SaaS to insurance. So not really one of the biggest concerns for us of sacrificing our opportunity per se. But yeah, I that's all I got for you there, Chet.
I love it. Joe, what about you? Like, how do you view this in terms of how soon should we get them actually doing the job duties? Specifically, probably speaking on the BDR side of the house. Obviously, I would also love some input on the AE side of the house that you see as well. But how soon do we get them practicing the tactical side of their duties without losing potential opportunity and sacrificing, strategy efficiency?
I'm on board with Troy. I think particularly with BDRs and SDRs, you've got a high barrier of entry. There's a lot of fear making that first phone call, sending out those emails. And I think the sooner you get them, I like the idea of doing mock calls and then making a call. And everybody has, segmented prospects, right? You've got your A prospects, your B and your C. And so there's no reason necessarily lose an opportunity. You have prospects that may not be the most ideal customer or so forth. So you can use those for practice if you need to. But I'm of the mindset that, the sooner people can practice what they've just learned, it's going to stick more. You're going to, accelerate their onboarding, which is why we love having them listen to calls, right? Because they can model that behavior and immediately get going on it. And I think that practice do, which I think is genius, is really the way that we should be doing it. Otherwise, I'll give you my own personal experience. When I started in sales many moons ago, I'd come back from boot camp, and it's my first week back in the field. And I was, doing all my prep work, and I was, mapping out my territory, making sure my desk was set up and all the things. And Friday comes around, and my boss stops by my desk and he's like, how's it going? I'm like, oh, it's going great. I got all this stuff going on. And he's like, great. How many customers have you seen? Yeah, so that's my job. I actually need to go see customers. I can't spend my entire time prepping because I was scared. But he let me do that so that I would, know. And so anyway, yeah, I hit the streets the following week. And I think that that's something that we need to be aware of, is that there is a sense of fear in something new. And so the sooner you can get people doing it, then that fear reduces, and then they begin to deploy the skills that you're teaching them. So train, do. I think Troy's got it there.
Yeah, I've always loved highlighting the pitfalls of my top reps with always asking them permission. But when people listen to calls, my favorite thing to do is to give them, I feel like too often we give people good versions of calls, but I like to take top reps and show their worst calls with their permission. Obviously, we don't want anybody to feel bad, but I think it alleviates that fear where it's like, Troy's the best BDR we have. He got wrecked on this cold call. It's just natural. It's going to happen to me, and I have to be okay to accept that, right? Because even the best sellers in your org have bad calls. We've talked about this, Joe, when we work together. Like our top sellers, and we're like, "Did you hear this discovery call?" And you're like,
"Badge of honor, man." If you back when we used to be able to get into offices, if you weren't chased out of an office, and I think today with BDRs as well, it's like those horrific calls. Those are badge of honors. That's how you earn your stripes in sales. So welcome them.
Troy, I just active listening here. I want to put you on the spot. So as someone who's done the job successfully and is now showing people at the same company how to do the job successfully, how often do you get in the trenches and make those cold calls with those reps, or let them listen to you? And I guess, what is your recommendation for, team leaders who are kind of in that player coach role? Like, do you believe in doing that? Or do you think if you do it and you fail, then people might not validate the training that you're giving them and go, well, Troy's not even doing it right? Like, what's your feeling on that and the kind of an outbound team lead role?
Yeah, I mean, I still am an individual contributor at Kixie, so I still do exactly what they're doing. I'm still booking demos, still making cold calls, going down the same list as they are. And I think that helps them a lot, because I do mess up, and I, show them that I'm messing up. I blew this deal doing that, but I had success on this call. And one thing that we do every day is we get one bad call and one good call of the day, and we go over them together as a team. And I think it just, hearing other people do bad and hearing other people do good just kind of gets rid of those nerves that you have. And I think it just brings everyone together and makes everyone do a much better job and learn a lot faster.
I agree. Speed to value. All right. Moving on. This is the one that I'm really passionate about, and I have a pretty contrarian point of view on this. And so I'm going to give a little context, and then I'd love to get Giorgia and Troy's input here. One of the things as an individual contributor, it's like the person that, as they're raised as a kid, they're like, I'll never do that to my kids, when their parents do something to them, right? So when I was an individual contributor, one of the things I always hated, that I promised I would never do as a sales leader, is the cut their teeth terminology. Here's a list of crap. Go see if you can polish a turd. And I hated that for two reasons. I'll tell you why. At the Sales Doctor, we teach this thing called the Goldilocks rule when it comes to mindset and motivation. And it's the not too hot, not too cold. So in terms of staying motivated, peak motivation happens in between, the bell curve of too hard and too easy to accomplish. If something's too easy to accomplish, you're going to accomplish it. You're going to be demotivated. It's just mundane. If something's too hard, you're going to fail too hard and too fast, and you're going to be demotivated. You have to find just a challenging enough task to keep, let's call it, like if you're thinking about, the path isn't clear, there's one or two defenders you got to beat, and maybe do a Euro step to the basket and flex your muscles a little bit, but you're not completely guarded by all five opposing defenders, right? I don't want you to cut your teeth. I want to give you a challenging layup, because I know that inbound opportunity, or that really warm outbound lead, is probably going to convert. And I want you to experience what that success feels like, because there's a dopamine rush behind it that motivates you and wants you to do better. However, a lot of sales orgs do not think this way, and they go, hey, here's a list of 10-month-old webinar leads that we did from a LinkedIn live show, right? Go call them and see them. And most people aren't even at that company anymore, and the list isn't enriched and all these other things. So I'm going to start with you first, Giorgia. When you're building enablement programs and onboarding programs, how do you implement that A, B, or C, as you refer to them, lead buckets and what people are pulling from? And how do you feel about the cut their teeth versus, hey, let's give them a challenging layup so they can at least have a better opportunity to experience some success and feel what that dopamine rush is like and want to keep repeating that cycle?
Right. I think the cut their teeth phenomenon is more a result of we don't have pipe. And so let's just get everybody busy in the hope that they can Hail Mary some business. And that's generally when I think people get desperate and they start digging through Salesforce for hope. Right. So I definitely believe that. I love that analogy of Goldilocks, because it's true. Sales is hard. Like, let's just put it out there. And cold calling sucks. We all hate it. And with technology today, it's interesting. We can provide at least more thoughtful lists. Like, we can make some bets. And I'm mindful. I love salespeople. In my heart, I'm in sales. And so I want to give them things that are achievable. I don't want to send them out just to dig holes. Right. And so I think it is challenging, because even though we have new tools, everybody's using them. And so we have to think about ways of being creative of how do we stand out? How do we to reach people with what, we want to help them with? At the company I'm consulting with right now, we have that problem. And I think there's also the market dynamics going on right now, which are extremely challenging. So you have to take that into account when you're thinking about your lead strategy. And so we're actually getting creative, and we're pulling Google map lists because we know that these places exist. And while they're not the warmest of leads, the fact that we know at least that they exist because they're real brick and mortar locations, that in and of itself is like, okay, the reps are willing to lend you a little bit of grace and say, all right, all things being equal, at least we know that humans are here. Let's give it a go. Because a lot of times you buy these lists and, or your lists in Salesforce are complete crap because they've been turned over 50 different times. And so you have to get creative. But in order for it to work, you also have to get, you have to have trust and a good relationship with your sales folks so that they lend you a little bit of that, that credibility. But it is challenging right now. But I don't believe you're going to be serving your company or your sales reps well by just giving them crap to do. Like, go have them clean out a closet or your media room or something. That would be more productive for them.
Yeah. And then when we give them the tough things to do, and this is a great segue to, Troy, your answer on the question, we're not enabling them with the right tools. And if you're going to toss them a big lead list to go cut their teeth on, then why the hell are you not using a tool like Kixie? So you're focused on the core part of that, which is not to enrich a data list. Essentially, that shouldn't be the core duty. It might be, and that's why they're doing it, but that's wrong. It should be to go have conversations, right? And conversations with people that are low interest. So there's very little opportunity cost there. But if the goal is to have conversations, then why do you have them clicking to dial constantly? And just getting nothing but voicemails or people that are like, I don't work there anymore. Get them connected with people that they can have conversations with, accelerate the time to conversation. It blows my mind how many people I talk to that are onboarding reps. And it's like, okay, well, hey, have you checked out Kixie? Are you using it? It's going to help people connect with prospects faster and achieve what we're trying to do during onboarding, which is get people having conversations as soon as possible with very, low friction lead lists. But Troy, how about you? Like, do you feel that reps should go and cut their teeth and work the bottom of the bottom? Or do you feel that maybe we should find ways to give them a challenging layup so they can at least experience a little bit of success in their first 30 days and get a rush of dopamine for how that feels and want to stay motivated to keep doing the hard things in front of them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to give them a useless list to call down. That makes absolutely no sense, in my opinion. But it kind of goes into like what I said earlier about training them on the industry, like landscape and the ICP and personas. I would have them right away just start prospecting a list that they want to call, with guidance, of course, teaching them what kind of personas at a company. Like, do you need to reach out to this person, the C-suite, whatever it is. I would get them doing that, making sales navigator lists, and then I would help them, plug that into Kixie. And they're calling people that, I've looked at. I would, potentially reach out to this person if I was in their position. So Yeah, I would never give someone that bottom of the barrel stuff. I have, contacts in our CRM that I would never have anyone reach out to because they're so old. They most likely don't work there. That just, I feel like that would be extremely unproductive. And I've heard of people doing that, and I don't see how that makes sense in anyone's eyes.
Yeah, I remember story time real quick. A job I had once where I was an AE and I was in my third week and I was starting to get more comfortable with everything. And I was like, all right, well, we know that you're an outbound guy. So why don't you go call this lead we just got from Software Advice and see what it is? I don't think it's in the right industry really or anything. I think there's probably a throwaway, but let's see. Let's go cut your teeth on it. I said, well, if you think it's going to be such a tough one, why don't you give it to the AE that you're always bragging about as such a rock star, right? He can turn anything around. Give me the one that needs give me the layup that basically raising their hand with a blank check. You know what I mean? It didn't really make much sense to me, but I've heard that time and time again. And I've seen sales leaders and frontline managers do it. And it's always kind of baffled me a little bit, but I love both your responses. And I'm glad that, hopefully maybe the orgs that I've been talking to, they're kind of outliers, because it seems like we got two really smart people here who think in the right line of thinking, in my personal opinion. So this is a tough question. This next one, it's on the morbid side of the conversation, I would say. But what are some onboarding success criteria, whether it's metrics or rubrics or even grading that you do, from qualification calls, cold calls, discovery calls, whatever that might look like, a scorecard that you built out? What are some of the onboarding success criteria that we should be holding our new sellers accountable to? And then the sad part of it, what does it look like if they miss? Because it does happen. And sometimes people aren't up to snuff in their first 30 days. As hard as we try, there's that occasional seller where we go, man, it's day 31 and I don't think you're ready to actually do this yet. What do we do when that happens? So what's the criteria that we follow? And then what do we do if in that unfortunate situation once in a while when we do miss? And I've lost track of who I'm throwing questions to, but I'm going to turn this one. I'm going to start with you first, Troy, because I think you left off on the last question. So we're going to kick it over to you to kick this one off.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, over the first 30 days, the main things I'm looking for is if they're retaining the information that I'm teaching them. How's their messaging looking? How's their messaging changing? How many people are they reaching out to? How many new prospects are coming in? Stuff like that. Just overall improvement, I guess. And I can't really speak much about what happens if they miss, because I haven't had to experience that yet as a team lead. So I'm thankful for that.
You're a lucky man. You're a lucky man.
I agree. We have some rock stars here at Kixie. So I guess Giorgia can teach me a little bit about what I might have to do if something goes awry. But of course, looking for if they're setting demos. I guess I'm really lucky again. We had everyone setting demos their second full week here at Kixie. They were setting demos. So in my eyes, that's success. And as long as that continues and they ramp fully to hitting full quota, that's a success in my eyes.
So you're analyzing a lot of like the volume kind of metrics, calls completed, meetings set, emails, like sales activity, and then outcomes of that when you're kind of looking at their performance, and then how soon it happens, right? Hey, you're booking demos your second week. That's fantastic, right? Like,
yeah,
good. You got it. Joe, yeah, let's flip it over to you. What are some of the onboarding success criteria that you look at? How do you score and grade them? And then what happens if they miss? What do we do on day 31? What's that conversation look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to differentiate two different kinds of things that we track from metrics. One are the behaviors that we know are going to lead to the kind of outcomes that we expect. And then there's the outcomes themselves. And so I think sometimes if we only have one metric like outcomes, you're not accounting for a learning curve or learning differences. And so you really want to be clear on the competencies, right? So what are the things that you need to be seeing them doing? Is it a skill? Well, I'll get to the skill or will thing here in a minute. So when you're clear about the behaviors that you should be seeing, the things that they should be saying, how do you know that they're retaining the information, right? You're listening to their calls, you're meeting with them afterwards. So I think that there are ways to differentiate these two things. And the reason why I say you want to differentiate them is you can have someone that's doing all the right things, that it's exhibiting the right behaviors, that just hasn't hit the outcomes yet. They got a bad patch. They got a bad territory. They've had a bad week. And it would be terrible to lose someone because we know what it takes to onboard someone. because you're only looking at outcomes. I think we need to look at the inputs. And if the inputs are there, then you need to give them a little bit more runway to get to the output. What do you do when they don't meet the criteria? I think that then is a skill or will issue, right? If you determine that it's a skill issue, then you've got to make a decision. Do we invest more time? Do you feel that they just need more time? They're doing the right things. Their understanding is just taking them a little bit more time. If it's a will issue where, for example, a lot of the tools that we have, if you're having them do pitches, you can see how many times they've practiced before they've submitted. Well, that will tell you if someone sends you a crap, pitch deck or a messaging example, and they've only practiced once before they submit it versus someone that practiced 5 times, that tells you someone is trying and there's just something missing. And the person that only did it once is telling you, this is how much they're going to invest. This is how much they care about it. So it's not an easy black and white, but I think when you're able to separate the inputs and the outputs, and, if someone is doing all the right things and the outputs just aren't there yet. And I would also be weary of people that have all these great outputs, but they're not really doing the things that you would expect them to do. Because we all know there's a lot of beginner's luck. And that's going to also taper off, right? Because it might be easy in the beginning, but as soon as things start to get a little bit more challenging, do they have the fundamentals and the discipline to see it through? My personal opinion is I would always invest in the person that's doing the right things, that is consistent, because that will pay off versus, the fly by the seat of your pants luck that eventually will not make it.
Yeah. I've always said recognize behaviors first, outcomes second.
Mm-hmm.
Outcomes will help you understand like what we're kind of looking for and dig deeper into the behaviors, but it's a funnel. And I love that you said that skill or will. That's going to stick with me because I've seen it. Sometimes it is a skill thing. Maybe you didn't even have enough time. Big shout out to a former BDR of mine many moons ago when I was at Pavilion, Sean Duty. He, we hired him in July of 2021, and he had a very aggressive onboarding schedule because of the July 4th and how they fell on the week. And, we got to the end of the month and I was like, all right, I'm taking a risk here. I think we could keep you around for another month, but we're going to put you through this ramping period now. And he said, let's bring it. He was very successful BDR when he worked with me. And it was definitely, he had both skill and will, which was great. But sometimes you get that magic, that magic combo, but yeah, is it a lack of skill or a lack of will? I love that you said that. This has been fantastic. If you've been listening to this conversation and have found value, I encourage you to reach out to both Troy and Giorgia. You can find them on LinkedIn. We've also got them connected to the LinkedIn event page here. Or if you're listening to this podcast episode version, we'll have links to their LinkedIn profiles in the show description. Both fantastic people. They know their stuff. They both have unique ways in which they can help your organization. So we're at that time of the show where I'm going to have each of you plug what it is you do at your company, how it helps, and essentially why someone should reach out to you. What's that trigger or that compelling event? I'm going to toss over to Troy first because my man's hitting the phones all day long. So he knows Kixie like the back of his hand. So we're going to put him on the spot. So Troy, let people know, let people hear your pitch.
Cool. Well, Kixie is a very versatile dialing texting platform. Like I told you earlier, a lot of people kind of think it's just an outbound power dialer, but we really just do everything. We do have a complete inbound functionality, as well as endless CRM automations. If you know Orem and Nooks, we do what they do. Then we also handle, all the inbound stuff like 8x8 and Ring Central. So if you're looking to get your entire team on one platform and ditch having 4 different dialing platforms for your team, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll get you set up with a trial and get your team rolling.
Tech stack consolidation and feature sets on steroids. I'll tell you what, Kixie is an absolute time saver, and I don't feel like I could ever do it another way. It's so funny when I look back at even 10 years ago, making calls with the phone, manually picking it up and dialing. Even it's like when I first discovered how to actually get a wireless headset working. many years ago when that became the thing where I was like, oh, I can actually walk around with my my Bluetooth little wireless headset now. Now we have things where we don't even need to make the dials. Yeah, those were the days. Joe, same for you. I know you're consulting a lot of sales teams and you're helping build out sales programs, but why don't you drop the 411 and what you could help people with that are interested in working with you?
Yeah, thanks, Chet. I am absolutely available to support enablement folks, especially those that might be out there looking for some guidance. I'm happy to coach you as well. My main focus right now is really supporting companies that are looking to streamline their go-to-market initiatives, understand how to leverage enablement as a revenue tool. Definitely revenue enablement is we leverage training, but it is not all training. There's so much more that we can do to really help streamline your go-to-market process, and love to talk to sales leaders and operational leaders to see how we can help.
I love it. And I've got a lot of time under my belt working with Joe, and I can tell you, I probably would have banged my head against a wall a lot more without her than having her. She's great at what she does, and she's very insightful and can also challenge you to think better about things. Sometimes I'll be like, "This is what I'm thinking about." She's like, "But is that the best way? I think we can do better." Joe got some of the best work out of me that I think I've ever done leading sales development teams. So love her for that. That's the end of this LinkedIn Live, the go-to-market game plan episode number 3. Every other Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, you can check us out. Every Wednesday, you can check out new episodes of the Sales RX podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure, in addition to listening to the podcast episodes, that you like, follow, rate the podcast, give it a review. If you think it sucks, give it a 1-star review. That's totally fine. We got one of those a month ago. It was awesome to see because I love when people actually speak their voice. Still didn't bring the aggregate down, which is nice, but connect with us, the Sales RX community. Go to www.thesalesdocrx.com and check out all of our free resources, past podcast episodes, and subscribe to our newsletter. We try to deliver bite-sized sales content every Friday in under 3 minutes. So it is text. It's not very visually appealing, but if you got 2.5 minutes, you can read through and maybe learn a thing or two. That's all for today. Appreciate you, Joe and Troy, for joining, and we'll see everybody on the next one.
Take care. Go get it.